Today's video sponsor is the brilliant Skillshare, so let me quickly tell you about them before the video begins. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of online courses that you can get unlimited access to with a simple premium membership. If you're just starting out in learning a new skill, trying to get your head around something like setting up a strong social media presence or taking your existing skills to the next level, you'll find plenty of classes put together by experts that are right for you. So, say you're setting up a YouTube channel or on Instagram and you want to make a striking personal logo, a quick browse will give you insight into forming your design and creating it on your computer. At only $10 a month for an annual subscription, this is a huge discount over in-person courses you'll find elsewhere. And as they've helped me get this video up, they're also going to help you with a 2-month free trial by clicking in the link in the description below. Try it, see for yourself what you can achieve with Skillshare. Click the link below for a 2-month trial absolutely free. Now, on with the video. With the season now over, sometimes my mind goes to weird questions that don't really need answering. I sat around thinking about the narrative of the season as a whole, the arc that played out the championship from March to December. And I thought, the way you see the championship as a whole, the way you experience the rivalry and the standings as the year goes on, that's partly dependent on the order of the calendar. So, in the spirit of fun, which in no way will make any sense due to 400 other factors that come into play, I present to you 2019 F1 Championship, but in reverse. Here's what would happen if every race was the same, but we visited the tracks in the opposite order. So in this parallel universe, the season kicks off in Abu Dhabi, which is a shame because we'd all like to start the season off with a bang, but we grin and bear it knowing Brazil is up next. Worryingly, Hamilton wins at an absolute canter, not even remotely challenged by the competition, taking pole position and the fastest lap for good measure. On the bright side, the podium is a mixed bag, with Red Bull's Max Verstappen and Ferrari's Charles Leclerc completing the top 3. Ferrari's new recruit is off to a great start with Bottas, Vettel and Albon completing the top 6. Some solid points laid down for Racing Point and McLaren as they take 4th and 5th in the Constructors. Round 2 in Brazil is classic controlled chaos. Max Verstappen wins in style, but behind him the 2 Ferraris crash and Red Bull's Alex Albon gets spun out of a podium position in the dying laps by Lewis Hamilton having a very clumsy day. With Hamilton penalised, Carlos Sainz gets his McLaren up from 20th to podium position, the first for McLaren in years. Are the Woking team back? And who should take second place but a tenacious Pierre Gasly in the Toro Rosso? Rumours now start to brew that Red Bull are considering bumping him up to the senior team based on this performance. Kimi and Gio bring back their Alfa Romeos home in 4th and 5th in what has been a stunning day for some of the lower midfield. And after just 2 races, Red Bull and Max Verstappen lead their championships with McLaren 4th, Alfa Romeo 5th and Toro Rosso in 6th. In the drivers' battle, Bottas is 6th and Vettel 8th in what has been an awful start to their campaigns. F1 next moves to the USA, where Bottas takes a confident win, overtaking the reigning world champion on track due to a superior strategy. So that's 3 different winners in 3 races, and we ask ourselves, is 2019 set to be a thrilling classic? Mercedes grabbed the 1-2 with Verstappen and Leclerc mopping up the higher points. A second retirement in 3 races for Vettel leaves him 11th in the championship, behind old teammate Kimi Räikkönen. Carlos Sainz and Pierre Gasly stay solidly in the top 10. Are they set for an incredible year in what we thought might be underpowered machinery? Mercedes win the next 3 races with Hamilton in Mexico and Russia and Bottas in Japan. Red Bull have to settle for worst of the best as Ferrari find pace with Vettel scoring 2 runner-up spots in a row before getting involved in a team orders round with Russia and ultimately retiring with energy recovery problems. Haas finally got off the mark in Russia after going 5 races without scoring a single point, much to the relief of Gunther Steiner and inverted troll doll Williams Story. Mercedes were marching away in front, but it was Red Bull, not Ferrari, holding strong in 2nd. McLaren looked sure and steady in 4th with almost twice the points of their closest rival, Toro Rosso. The floodlights came on in Singapore, where Vettel finally scored what would hopefully be the first of many victories this year. His campaign had a stuttering start, but due to a smart strategy and a terrific undercut, he nabbed the lead from teammate Leclerc, with Verstappen behind and the 2 Mercedes off the podium entirely. Albon took his usual spot as best of the rest, but rumours continued that Red Bull were looking to swap him with Pierre Gasly, who continued to look strong and confident in the junior team. The European season began in Italy and Belgium as usual in Reverso World. Charles Leclerc took his first 2 F1 wins back-to-back in style, first in front of the Tifosi, while his teammates span off the track and caused a thoughtless accident by rejoining unsafely. It will be Vettel's 4th non-points finish out of the 8 races so far, leaving him a distant 5th in the title hunt. Then in Belgium, Leclerc once again led home the Mercedes cars with Vettel denied a podium. As F1 headed into the spring break, Renault had managed to fight back after a shaky start and work their way up to 5th in the championship thanks to a very solid and surprising showing at Monza. Hamilton led the driver's title by a whole race win from his teammate, but the battle for second was tight between Bottas and Leclerc. Despite a race win early in the season, a couple of retirements had left Max Verstappen adrift in 4th, with Vettel and Albon worst of the top drivers. The battle of best for the rest was intense, with Perez and Sainz only 1 point apart. The second half of the season had much promise, with 5 different winners to date and just 21 points between 4th and 7th in the Constructors. We got back underway in Hungary with a Hamilton win. He was already looking completely unstoppable for the championship, but that wouldn't stop the others from trying. Lewis and Max exchanged wins over the next 4 races, and with Leclerc and Bottas taking retirement and just 2 podiums, the battle for second in the title became incredibly intense between 3 drivers from 3 different teams. The big news over the spring break, of course, was that Red Bull had swapped out Albon for Gasly in the hope that the Frenchman's heroic efforts at Toro Rosso would translate to the senior team. It was only fair to trial their selection of drivers, of course, said the team. And over the first 4 races after the break, Gasly kind of did what Albon was already doing. He finished best of the rest where he could, but suffered in the changeable conditions at Hockenheim, something Albon notably thrived in. Hockenheim chaos brought some joy to both Williams and Haas, who both managed to get more points on the board. Well, just the 1 point for Williams, but that's infinitely better than where they were before. Over this time, Hamilton had doubled his championship lead over Bottas from 25 to 51 points, with the Finn realistically focusing now on second place in the championship, having lost it intermittently to both Leclerc and Verstappen in this period. And if the title was in any doubt, Lewis put the hammer down and won the next 4 races on the trot. By the end of the Spanish Grand Prix, he pulled within a hair of winning the title. Sebastian Vettel, a little too late, had started to get his act together and put some real points down, with some high positions in every race bar Italy and Britain, where he was a bit of a clumsy oaf. Consistency was not going to be the take-home word of Vettel's season. We'd almost forgotten he was a 4 times world champion. Bottas, Leclerc and Verstappen stayed within 8 points of each other from Germany to Canada, but had started to separate in recent races. Not so much for it to be a sure thing, but enough to make it difficult for non-Mercedes drivers. And just to ram it home, Mercedes took 4 1-2s in a row at the end of the season. That's 8 wins on the bounce for Mercedes, turning what looked like a potentially competitive season into an absolute spanking. Hamilton took the title in Baku with 3 races left to go, and Bottas cleaned up for second place, his highest championship finish. The battle for third was still pretty tight, but Leclerc didn't quite manage to catch Verstappen. Vettel finished a lowly 5th in the title, but the battle for 6th was very interesting. Gasly and Sainz entered the finale in Australia only a point apart, but ultimately finished pointless, giving the McLaren driver the honour of 6th in the championship. Gasly's run in the senior team hadn't really borne the fruit Red Bull had hoped, with the Frenchman hardly troubling the podium and often looking ill at ease. Perhaps switching teams mid-season wasn't the way to develop his driving. So, what did we achieve by flipping the season here? Well, one thing we did was get rid of the early battle between Bottas and Hamilton, where we had briefly thought, Valtteri might actually make a go of this, and instead gave Bottas a slightly stuttering start and actually created a rivalry instead between Hamilton and Verstappen. Now, can you imagine leaving the first 3 races with Verstappen in the lead of the championship? Was another team finally going to challenge the great Mercedes? In our excitement, we might well have deluded ourselves much more than some of us naive folk did with Bottas this year. And I count myself in that group. I am forever the foolish optimist. So yeah, if we compare the Hamilton versus Bottas story, we go from an initial rivalry that splits early and never really closes again, into Hamilton keeping Bottas at well over arm's length for the whole season. We might never even imagine Bottas was in with a shout in this backwards world. However, what we do create is this rather excellent battle for second place, which races through until late in the season. Whereas before, Bottas spent much of all season lonely in second place, this time he has to fight off 2 other young drivers from 2 other teams. In this case, perhaps Mercedes might start to question if Bottas really was the right driver for them, if Hamilton was sailing off into the distance and Valtteri was struggling to keep the other cars at bay. The psychological question here is fascinating. Further down the field, we see Carlos Sainz assert himself early on and then defend his position through the season instead of starting off slowly and then pushing up through the championship table. Similarly, McLaren grab 4th early and look untouchable for most of the season. Haas have themselves a sort of a sad season where they barely scrape a point until halfway through the season and then only grab scraps here and there when they can. In fact, looking at the team's battle, whereas in reality the top 3 were the same top 3 all year long, in Reverso World we get this cool pseudo-battle before the European season, with Red Bull scrapping over all 3 places in the championship before it finally settles down. Though the midfield is somewhat less messy. Reality showed the midfield absolutely flip-flopping all over the title table, whereas in Backward Land it's a little more sedate. The thing is though, and this is why it's a very silly thought experiment for fun and not a legitimate call to reverse the order of the championship or anything, we fail to take into account here development. So regardless of how the championship is structured, we will likely see more volatility between teams as they figure out how to get the best from their cars and keep upgrading them through the season. This rate of development will tend to slow down towards the end of the season as people get their cars towards the best they can be, so teams will settle into their performance position. That's why in real life you can get a lot more jockeying around in the first half of the season, whereas if you run the season in reverse, you're shoving a lot of the development to the far end of the season, so smoothing out the title battle a little bit. Also of note, Hamilton wins the title one race earlier here than in reality. Now there's no way of rearranging the races so it goes down to the wire, such was Hamilton's lead and general consistency. In fact, even if you arrange the races from Hamilton's worst to best results, he still reaches the top of the standings by race 14 and claims the title with 2 races to go, no later than reality. Though what a season this would be! In this weird world, Verstappen actually leads the championship for the first 8 races, and we see Max's best results come during Lewis's worst races. Now this makes some sense, as the Red Bull tended to shine when Mercedes was having an off day. And if you plot how Hamilton and Verstappen scored compared to their own average score across the season, you see there's an element of mirroring. When Hamilton has a poor day, Verstappen shines. What we can see from this weird little data jiggle is at the top end, consistency remains your greatest ally. If you turn up every race weekend and hammer in decent points, it's all going to add up across the season. If you win some days but trail home 5th on other days, it's never going to compete against hitting that podium race after race after race. In the midfield, you can get away with bad days more and fight back with some decent development as the points difference is more marginal. For example, Haas only finished 27 points ahead of Williams. Imagine if Williams had figured out their car over the summer break. They'd only have to score 3 points per race to be able to fight back. Now next year, if someone gets a march on the title early, they'll be very tricky to stop. If we do see a mixed performance, then we might be game on. This was again, just for fun. Thanks for watching this silly aside.